So now this is our conclusion to our previous episode of the loudness series, speaker excursion versus sensitivity, and now we'll look into the technical aspects. So I will show you the physics behind it. So let's take an example. Let's look at 100 Hertz. So a driver needs to create a 100 Hertz signal at 110 dB sound pressure level. So let's make a comparison. A 15-inch Altec driver, the 515C, in my speaker cabinet in the wall, it needs to travel 1.3 millimeters to reach 110 dB at 100 Hertz. And if you take a modern HIN mid-bass coupler, it has to travel in the order of about 20 millimeters. So you see that if you see it when you listen to an orchestral piece and there's a 100 Hertz bass note in it, then you can barely see the cone move with the Altec. And if you have a modern speaker, modern audiophile speaker, then you see that 8-inch driver almost falling out of the cabinet. And in the previous episode, I showed you the example that the issue with that huge movement range is the turbulence, the problems that happen with the air coupling. But power-wise, the solution today, if you are an average audiophile or even an educated audiophile, you will say, wow, 20 millimeter excursion today is not a problem. All you need is more power. And in the old days you had like a single and tube amplifiers, like putting out a few watts, maybe like 20 watts at most. But now we have like thousands of watts. So who cares what is our speaker driver cone's excursion? We care, it could be like a yard long excursion. We don't care, we have enough power. Oh yeah, I agree. But there are some qualms about that. How much more power do we exactly need for that excursion? And the short answer is not that much more. And the true answer is just to achieve that movement, you don't need that much more energy. But to achieve the same movement with the same control, you need exorbitant amounts of energy. And part of this problem, and why no one is aware of that control factor, that how much power is needed for that, is because nobody measures speaker distortion. So when you look at the stereophile measurements or any other kinds of measurements that come out when new products are released, if we talk about an amplifier, you can imagine here your newest amp, it doesn't matter. They publish the frequency range. Let's say it plays between 10 Hertz to 100 kilohertz within 0.1 dB. And they give you the distortion as well. And they say that the THD is 0.01% at 1 watt, and they also give you when it's at full power. Let's say you have a 100 watt amplifier, and then the distortion rises to 0.1% at 100 watt, and then you know what your amplifier is capable, how it can handle pressure at high output levels. But when we look at speakers, what speaker reviews come out, they specify the frequency range of your speakers. Let's say that plus minus 3 dB between 20 Hertz and 20 kilohertz, but no one ever gives any flying figure about the amplitude distortion of your speakers. So they don't give you any clues on what are the distortion figures when you play it at, let's say, like 50 dB quiet listening level versus 100 dB very loud listening level. And this is really unfortunate. Part of it, they don't do it because it's really hard to measure. I would say like impossible to measure in consistently. I mean consistently among multiple speakers. You would need very elaborate setups for that. but also they do not measure it because, and they don't even talk about it because it would expose the Achilles heel of high excursion drivers, which is when you go for a higher amplitude, let's say like 80 dB versus 50 dB, then the low excursion drivers distortion figures rise much more sharply than high excursion drivers. So high excursion drivers, even at 100 dB, there's negligible amplitude distortion from them, and with your low efficiency drivers you already have trouble much lower than that. And how do we know that? What's the physics behind it? So it's there was this guy, everyone has heard about him, Albert Einstein. He came up with a very simple equation, and he said that energy equals mass times the square of the impulse. He said this in different words, but that's coming from Einstein's equation. So the energy, which means the output power your amplifier needs to move your driver cone, is correlated to the weight of that cone, and not just the cone, but the suspension, the acoustic suspension of your cone. And that also includes the pressure differential between the air, how well it can couple to the air. So for high efficiency speakers, the cone can be moved very easily, not just because the cone is light. Maybe it's not even light. Today we have lighter cones than what they used to build, like the 515C or any of the Altec drivers cones. But the suspension needs to be much more rigid to be able to handle that really high excursion and to be able to handle the tremendous back pressure from the tiny cabinet. And that's why the M for your tiny speaker is actually the same or even bigger than the acoustic mass of a very efficient loudspeaker. And the problem is that it has to travel much further than the high efficiency driver, and to travel out that far at the same frequency. So let's say you need to reach at the same time, which means same frequency means same time. So at the same time, instead of traveling a 1/10 of an inch, you need to travel an inch, and for that you need to gain like 10 times the speed to travel 1 inch in comparison to travel 1/10 of an inch. And to travel to like 10 times the speed, you do not need just 10 times more energy, you need 10 times 10 more energy. So if you go to our speakers comparison that I used, I mean the driver comparison that I used in the previous episode, there's a 20 times speed differential between the two, so you need 200 times more energy to move your high excursion driver to reach the same SPL as you need with the high efficiency driver. And to have 200 times power, it means that you need a 200 watt amplifier to keep you at the same distortion figure as the 1 watt amplifier does its job with a high efficiency speaker. And you see, this gives all the validity for the free power amplifiers that 1 watt is enough if you have a 100 dB speaker, because it gives you the same amount of control over a driver as a 200 watt amplifier gives over a 90 dB speaker. So that's it. So if you want clarity and quality, then a 1 watt amp with an Altec cab will give you the same precision, same clarity, detail as a 200 watt solid state amp with a lower sensitivity speaker. And when you need that much more energy, it's also key and vital for these solid state amplifiers to have really high damping factor in addition to power, because you need to control that driver movement like 200 times greater precision than you control for a high efficiency driver. So that's why damping factor is vital for solid state amps with high power, like when you are talking of hundreds of watts, and speakers with high excursions and low efficiency. And that's why damping factor doesn't give a flying figure for high efficiency speakers with small or medium power amps, because there the driver doesn't need that sort of hand holding and controlling, because it couples to the air well. And with your high excursion driver, there is very poor air coupling, so you need to control the figures out of it to keep it on track. So let's see. So actually we already touched base on that, but there's that you need like 100 times more power to have the same control, even though you need only 10 times more power to have the same SPL. So if you go from 90 dB to 100 dB efficiency, to keep up with that change with your amplifier, you only need 10 times more power. So if you have a 100 dB speaker and a 1 watt amplifier, then if you have a 10 watt amplifier, 90 dB speaker, they will play at the same SPL. But this, everyone knows this, but what they don't know is that to have the same control over your loudspeaker, you need to have 100 times the power and not 10 times. So this is why, as in my case, I'm listening to my Ampex amplifiers, which are 25 watt, and the walls, they are about 104 watt, 4 dB efficient. And if I want to have, for example, chronosonic speakers instead of them, then I would need like 2,000–3,000 watts amplifier to have the same control over the drivers. So that's why you see the Dan D'Agostino amplifiers, which are like kilowatt or more, being used with Wilson products and other really modern and new speakers, because that's how much power is required to give the same to give a high level of control over the driver. And with a high efficiency speaker, you need much less, 100 times less power to have the same amount of control at the same volume speaker or SPL level as they play. However, what is another consequence of this equation that no one talks about? Well, they might mention, okay, we have 100 times more power, so what's your point? There it is. And there are even some solid state amps which have like 10,000 watts, and you can go even higher. Just build your own power plant, and then we can build you an amp that has like 100 kilowatts. Who cares? We can do it. But the issue here is that if you increase the power by a factor of 100, you also increase the equipment distortion by a factor of 100. So the end result will not be the same. So you are introducing a lot of changes and nasties and side effects to the sound to reach the same amount of control. And the end result will be like Darth Vader, that it will have the sound will modern audiophile system sounds really extremely controlled. I would say even like over controlled, because look at Darth Vader. He is all powerful, he can do anything, he can go out the field and destroy all of his competitors. So if you think about audiophile systems as Jedi Knights, then Darth Vader is the best, and that's like a modern show system, like a D'Agostino Wilson combo. It's the best because it can go out and kill all of the Jedi Knights. But there's one major difference between them, is that Darth Vader, actually two differences, that Darth Vader is not a man, he's a man-machine thing, and so there's a lot of artificiality, lots of changes introduced to make that sound really showy, really stand out, and to seem as if it's of a different caliber. And then the second thing, it's too much control. So if you know about the Star Wars universe, Darth Vader doesn't do anything from his own will. He follows the Emperor's will. He's totally subject. He's even willing to kill his own son because the Emperor has commanded him to do so. And why I bring Star Wars here? It's because this doesn't really work on the long term. So it works for the short run, even like for Darth Vader, it worked for decades and decades. But when finally he is faced off against his son, he chooses his son and he decides to kill his master. And that's what I call as the audiophile burnout. So when you subscribe to the Darth Vader type of sound, then you are really thrilled and enjoyed by it, but on the long run you will notice that it keeps you on a certain track. And if you want to follow that type of sound, and if you enjoy it, you are in heaven. But it doesn't let you do anything else other than what it tells you to listen to. So there will be like 15 of your favorite recordings, you can play that, and it won't allow you to listen to anything else. And that's because of this red line here, is that a lot of power introduces a lot of distortion, and you need really fine-tuned circumstances so that you stay within the confines, within the limits where this system is comfortable playing. And when you have a high efficiency system where the amplification is really fine-tuned so that you do not have issues, then in that case you are allowed to listen to a wide range of music again. So here I want to conclude the high excursion versus high sensitivity debate, is that high excursion drivers, whether in a cheap system or a very expensive system, they suit more like a PA role. So when you need to produce very high SPLs, very high volume levels at a reasonably affordable cost. Because let's look at the fact that a lot of high-end systems that are built like that, even though they cost like $100,000 or more, but when you listen to them, it really sounds like a PA system. So, and under that I mean that when you go to a concert and it's an amplified concert, so for example you are hearing Diana Krall sing, you do not hear her singing, she's singing into a microphone, she's through a PA system. But the difference between like a $1 million audiophile system and the PA system in the concert hall is that when you are at the concert hall, you are hearing an average to okay sounding PA system, and your $1 million audiophile system is the best sounding PA system that we can come up with. So being a PA system is not necessarily something degrading, because it depends on the level of craftsmanship, or how it is implemented, and it can be implemented at a very high level. But when the high efficiency drivers excel at is high fidelity, is to create as much dynamic detail as the sound from your recordings with the lowest amount of distortion from your gear. So whatever you do, if your drivers are lower efficient, they will show that much times more of your equipment distortion. And if your drivers are high efficient, then your equipment's distortion will count much more into the sound. So this is why when you have really expensive stereo systems with really high wattage amplification, you are limited to a very narrow range of music, because the smallest problems in the recording, they get transformed by the amplifier's distortion and by your speaker's distortion, and they become inaudible. And if there are problems in the recording, the high sensitivity drivers will tell you that, but they will not add additional distortion that will render it unbearable. So don't think for a second if you have high efficiency system, then everything will sound perfect. No, you will still be able to tell the difference between a junk quality recording and an exceptional recording, but the difference is that as opposed to PA systems, you will be able to enjoy even the crappiest recording, and it will not come through as I want to turn off my system right away. It will come through like, geez, this junk can sound that good. I'm just astounded. So this is where I'm looping back to the video that was before the loudness series, that can you play louder to compensate for compression, because that's what I use this tiny critter to show that when we have a recording, the recordings compress the dynamics, and when we play it louder volumes, that partially compensates for compressed music. But to be able to do this, you need high efficiency system that doesn't add its own distortion to the sound. So that's why with a high efficiency system you can play compressed music and it will still sound good, because when you listen to it at a high enough level, it will make sense to your ears, but we are not introducing equipment distortion, so you can enjoy it. And when you have a low sensitivity system with using high excursion drivers, then when you listen to it at that volume where it would make sense, you are already adding as much equipment distortion that you will be unable to listen to it because it is unbearable. So that's why high efficiency systems give you the freedom to listen to whatever you want to listen to it, and it doesn't matter you stream it from YouTube, junk MP3, you will be able to enjoy it. Yes, you will hear that it's a junk MP3, you will hear the coding errors, but they will not drill a hole through your ear. And I show you my favorite example, because with my Vol cabinet that I built, they use the Altec 515C driver and the Altec 288, and this is an example for some extremely compressed material. So I was watching She-Ra through Netflix, and I can say that probably this is the most compressed thing I heard in 2020, and when you hear the characters doing their dialogues, it's just like, oh my god, this is absolutely terrible. They compressed and phase processed the heck out of the voices, but it's okay, because you are watching a kid's show and they are cartoon characters. That's alright if they speak funky, right? And when they have the sound effects are not as much compressed in dynamics, but they're still kind of compressed. And if you listen to it at a quiet volume to a medium volume, actually with these Altecs, they are okay to hear and pretty tolerable and decent. If you listen to it with a normal speakers or normal audio, even normal audiophile system, you cannot listen to it. You just shut it off and ask your kid to go upstairs and watch it on his on his laptop, or give him the phone and, okay kid, watch She-Ra on the phone. But what I did is I cranked up the volume of She-Ra to loud, as if you were in a movie theater, and my eyes just popped open like, oh my god, what am I listening to? It totally transformed, and it was like I'm in a movie theater, and the sound effects became insanely amazing. And there was, for example, a part where they teleported to a different universe, and they had some things happening there, and it really felt like I'm going into a different universe. The sound effects that accompanied the visuals were just flabbergastingly insane. So that's why I can recommend everyone to connect to high efficiency speakers with here I'm using a theater amplifier, the Ampex, but actually during this She-Ra experience I used my single-handed amp, which is about here if She-Ra would not be covering the picture, and that one, the peak output of that amplifier into these speakers is about 800 milliwatts, less than a watt. And it put out such below 30 Hz and subsonic content for She-Ra. Yes, She-Ra has crap ton of subsonic, like below 20 Hz material, that you feel like the world is opening up, and the fabric of space is getting ripped apart, and you're being teleported to a different universe. And this is a feeling that you just cannot get out of, even if you have a wisdom system. And it's not because it cannot handle the frequency range, but because it cannot handle the material. So you are restricted to a grain of sand versus enjoying all of the beaches in the universe. So this is how I feel as a typical audiophile, using typical audiophile systems. It feels like a chinchilla in a cage. It's from a corrugated cage to an iron cage if you look for $1 million systems, but it still feels that you are in a cage and very limited as to what you can listen. You have to listen to those recordings which were specially engineered for your audiophile high-end systems. And 99.9% of music on earth is not available to you. And with my Altec system, I can listen to whatever I want. So that's my lesson for you all about speaker efficiency. It's not just about these particular speakers that I built and this particular amps I restored or whatever. It applies to the efficiency versus excursion war. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you found the information useful and you learned something from it. And if you are an equipment designer, you hopefully will incorporate these into your thoughts, that perhaps efficiency is really important. And I need to tell you, everyone, that I'm seeing a trend in the past 10 years that the companies are finally ramping up the efficiencies. So before 2000, we have seen that the efficiency of the speakers, that just plummeted. And basically it plummeted down to the 70s. And from the 70s, it was coming up to the high 90s. But now we see more and more high-end speaker manufacturers whose figures are in the mid-90s or even higher. And that's wonderful news. It means that if this goes on for like 20 more years, you can also listen to Shira at home. So thank you for listening. Bye bye.